I've chosen this topic because cultural differences have always captured my attention, and in my opinion they represent a source of treasure that must be preserved. In a globalized and homologated world, it's important to protect this diversity because that's what makes our world unique. The figure of the linguistic and cultural mediator is spreading in the modern world. This professional role implies, beyond linguistic competencies and languages knowledge, also good competencies in terms of culture. This is very important for a good communication, but it also represents a form of open-mindedness and respect for a society that is different from ours. It's thus important that mediators develop a form of open-mindedness and be interested in the knowledge of new cultures, enhancing their personal background. In Italy, there are two different concepts about roles and tasks of linguistic and cultural mediators. The first gives the mediator the task of providing for the lack of public services and responding to the requests that come from weaker and less equipped users. On the other hand, according to the second concept, cultural mediator refers to someone who acts to identify new forms of social and dialogue organization. In that sense, the function of a cultural mediator seems to be more complete and more connected to the future, because the mediator actually has to create relations and social networks. Mediators aren't just facilitators of communication, they are also likely to have the task of spokesperson of a single human being or a group, to express ideas and create projects. For those reasons, linguistic and cultural mediators have to follow an ethic that respects the personal information of the two parties involved and also those regarding the communication. For that, it's fundamental that mediators respect the professional secret in relation to the knowledge of difficult situations, but at the same time, they have to create a mood of confidentiality that is essential for the good luck of the communication. They have to be neutral, which means that they have to maintain the right distance from the two parties and they can't replace them. They have to be transparent in the communication, and that becomes very difficult when literal translation is needed, because it can be related just to the linguistic range aspects, but it has to comprehend also the sphere of feelings, experiences, and values that lie in the meaning of words. Despite the importance of this profession, in Italy there isn't a national homogeneous regulation in the setting of linguistic and cultural mediation, and often regions, associations, and institutions organize some initiatives to define the professional role and the educational curriculum of mediators. In Italy, linguistic and cultural mediation is involved in the following settings: education that comprehends also the experience of different associations, healthcare system, administrative and working field, legal field, economic field, refugee centers, and sport. In this field, there are different cases related to linguistic barriers in which players, coaches, and sports managers found it difficult to overcome linguistic and cultural barriers, most of all in football. In the first part, I mentioned people that played an important role in mediation, for example, Eugenia Nida, expert of the translation of sacred Christian texts, who supported translators and specialists proposing new ways of conceiving communication, and Roman Jacobson, author of important theoretical works in the field of linguistic translation and language in general. Also at European level, mediation plays an important role because there's a variegated background at linguistic and cultural level. Indeed, the European Union, composed by 27 member states, comprehends 24 official languages and also lots of dialects, regional variations, and languages that are part of the European context thanks to immigration. For these reasons, some institutions are born, like the European Federation of National Institutions for Language, that comprehends proponents of the most important linguistic institutions of the member states of the European Union. Each member state is represented by a maximum of 2 institutions, and each one is involved and committed in the support and promotion of the language or languages spoken in the country, and the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, that is an international standard that describes the linguistic abilities reached by people who study a foreign European language to confirm the linguistic level. To show the importance of mediation also in the cultural field, I proposed an example about the contact between 2 different countries, not only in geographical terms, Japan and Italy. I collected the proof of a Japanese girl who explained me the cultural difficulties she found living in our country and how it was difficult to adapt. In the second part, I shift the focus at the international level, studying mediation in the USA and Latin America. The Handbook of Protection through Cultural Mediation, devised by Crisis Response and Policy Center, listed a few principles that are crucial for cultural mediation. For example, do not harm and damage the parties, keep all the information in the strictest confidence, be aware of the role and the responsibilities cultural mediators have, treat all the parties equally regardless of their nationality, ethnicities, and language, convey the message as faithfully as possible. In the USA, linguistic and cultural mediation is used in refugee and migration centers. In these environments, mediators usually mediate between refugees, migrants, and other actors representing governmental or non-governmental sectors, on some occasions even between different groups of refugees and migrants. In the hotspots, which are places where migrants and refugees gather or stay for a short period of time, activities in which mediators are involved are, for example, assisting in information sharing. Healthcare, that requires an additional set of skills and specific knowledge. Mental health, mediators will perform between psychologists, psychotherapists, and psychiatrists, and will participate in highly intense and emotionally charged conversations, interviews, counseling sessions, or therapies. Welfare, types of conversation in which cultural mediators would be performing cultural mediation are dialogues, interviews, consultations, group sessions with a group of beneficiaries, workshops or interventions and emergencies. Education to promote effective relationships between people from different cultures and facilitate the social inclusion of refugees and migrants. In South America, linguistic and cultural mediation was born late, with some differences between each country, and from the 90s, an attention related to this field started to develop. In Brazil, it increased a lot in recent years, through focused teaching to mediators according to the working field. Despite that, in lots of countries, it isn't very diffused. For example, Peru is characterized by important cultural differences, but legislation doesn't recognize it, considering all the citizens as Hispanics. American and Latin cultures got in touch thanks to the number of immigrants in the USA that increased a lot in recent years. Most of immigrants come from Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Thanks to the presence of these two cultures, a new language was born, Spanglish, that is a topic of the third part of my work. It's the mix between American English and Spanish, and it was born between 1965 and 1970. It's difficult to say the exact number of people speaking that language because it isn't a standardized language. The use of it depends on the era where it is spoken, and for this reason, it hasn't got fixed grammar and terminology. People who speak Spanish do it to explain to the other part what they are trying to say because they are in a linguistic context that is different from theirs. So people use this language to reproduce in a literal way words used by other people, personalize the message to facilitate a better understanding, show their mixed identity. Spanglish is spreading more and more in these years, and it's used also in films and songs. It's a good example of how nowadays globalization concerns not only the linguistic mix, but also the cultural sphere.